right, welcome everyone tuning in live and also everyone that's watching this recording. I'm excited to be here today, teaching you how to repair and teaching you more about understanding attachment styles. This was huge for me. I think it's vital in helping you understand relationships and how to do conflict better. I'm relationship coach Bryce Bauer. If you don't already know me, you might also know my wife, Jenny. She's a relationship coach and marriage and family therapist. We do a lot of this work together. And if it wasn't for her, I don't think that I would be in the relational space. I worked in the therapy industry for about 6 years before we met, which was about 6 years ago. And I realized, even though I had done a lot of personal work, that I really wasn't that good at relationships. My resume wasn't that great, a lot of bad breakups. And coming into relationship with Jenny, I realized I had a lot to learn. So slowly made this shift into relationship work. And I love it. Yeah, this is my favorite thing to talk about, favorite thing to do. So I'm excited to be with you here today. So I also wanted to start off with a quick anecdote from my personal life. So I grew up in Arkansas and all my family still lives there. And that's my mom and my dad who've been married for close to 40 years. And then my younger sister and her husband. And I love all of them, close with all of them. I really love her husband too. We're friends every time I come into town. It's just really close. He's an awesome dude. But we were on a Zoom call a few months ago, just kind of hanging out. That's what we do once in a while because we don't get to see each other in person that much. And at one point I said something like, yeah, relationships can be pretty hard. And he was like, actually, I think that our relationship is really easy, referring to him and my sister. And I was kind of like stumped because I assumed, because I do relational work, so I just see behind the scenes a lot. And most people, even if it looks kind of easy from the outside, when we dig into it, there's usually a lot going on. You know, there's a lot of unresolved stuff and little conflicts that happen, even if they're not talked about. And so I kind of took that in and thought about it. And I was like, what, I started kind of second guessing myself a bit, like, what if he's right? What if relationships actually can be easy and the way I'm going about it is actually much harder? I'm just doing it the hard way. And I sat with this a little bit longer. It like really stuck with me for some reason. Like I was a little bit triggered by it. And at the same time, I was like, I wanted to understand myself and why I was triggered. And after sitting with it a little bit longer, I realized that it could be true that some people end up in a relationship and it is kind of easy. Maybe they're compatible. Maybe their styles just fit together well. And maybe sometimes people just fall into roles really easily that they can stay stuck in a bit, but it just works for them, And I look at traditional relationship models as, that's what some people do. Like the husband goes to work, the wife takes care of the kids, and they don't really fight. I mean, this was my parents, and they have a good marriage, and there's nothing I can judge there. Like I really do think my parents have a good marriage, and my sister and her husband have a good marriage. And there's something about really setting an intention to use relationship as a crucible to better understand myself that feels way more interesting to me. And if I'm taking that road, I'm going to run into conflict because that's part of the process of self-exploration and growth. So if you're on this journey and you're like, oh my God, like I started doing this work and it seems like things are getting worse or they're getting harder. What I want to say is I'm right there with you on this one. I think that doing this type of work is hard. Going into the gym is hard. And I think there's a huge payoff to doing relationships in this way and breaking the old model of traditional relationship. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So it's not easy, and I think it's totally worth it. And it's way more interesting than just falling into a traditional role where like there's not a lot of space to explore and expand relationship in a way that's like, yeah, really exciting and fulfilling. Cool. So let's jump into this. So first, we're going to talk about attachment styles, and then I'm going to talk about how to repair conflict before, during, and after. And then I want to open it up to any questions, and we'll see if any questions come through, either via email, live. Yeah. So looks like we have a little bit of an issue here. Okay, there we go. So you may have heard of attachment styles before, and this is my own spin on attachment styles. And the reason why I want to reframe this is because typically with the old model of attachment styles, you have like, you are this or you are that. And it's like really never changing. That's the theory behind this, is that whatever your relational blueprint was growing up, that's what it is for the rest of your life. And I think there's a lot of validity to that. And the way that I look at it is that even though you might have a kind of role that you go into or default to most often, this can also change when you're in relationship with different people. When you're in a conflict, it can switch between partners. So there's this whole spectrum that we can operate on. And so instead of saying that you're this and you're that, and then we always have to kind of do things the same way and with the same solutions, this provides a lot more space. So you might be more likely to be the avoider in most contexts, but then you might also switch to being the fixer or the seeker in others, and your partner might do the same. So what we have here is we have on one side of the spectrum, we have the avoider. So that I'm going to go into more explanation about that, but it's kind of self-explanatory. Then you have the rock. This is when you're feeling secure, you're at zero charge, you've got your own back, you're able to speak up for your needs firmly, but also hold compassion for whatever's happening in your life or your partner's life. And then you have the fixer. So there's really a positive connotation more than the avoider with the fixer. But the way that I'm using the term, the fixer, is this is someone who's anxiously trying to control things and fix things, fix emotions, fix the other person. They're invading into the other person's space and trying to change things. So that's what I mean by the fixer. Hopefully that helps with context. So if we have those three styles, then we're going to have certain matchups. So this can be in a bigger context of relationship, or this can be in any given conflict. So you have the avoider and the avoider. I sometimes refer to this as roommate syndrome. This is people that don't fight, but they also don't really talk about anything. And so the intimacy kind of just fizzles and atrophies. And then you're just kind of in a roommate situation. This happens sometimes. Fixer, avoider, and fixer. That's a common one, also known as it's like the person that's chasing and the person that's avoiding, pursuer and avoider. It's another way to look at that one. Happens a lot in dating, I find. And then you have the rock, who's with the avoider and the fixer. And then you have two rocks. So this is people that are in a secure relationship with each other, even though they may resort to avoiding or trying to fix. More often than not, they're in a secure foundation with each other in the relationship. Okay. And just noticing where you feel like you are most often. So you might think about where you're most likely to default to. And then if you're in partnership, yeah, what kind of relationship do we have most often? Looking at all those different variations. Okay, so the avoider obviously wants to avoid conflict at all costs. It's scary. I find that these are usually highly sensitive people. So even though they might appear like they're stone cold or they don't care, I think these are often the most sensitive people that had their emotions shut down often at an early age, and they don't know how to really own that and work with that. So it's just easier to avoid. Also, negative self-talk is a big one with the avoiders. More likely to feel less than other people versus like better than. They feel more safe when they're alone. That's where they might go to feel more resourced, is they need space. They may go silent or flat, their affect. Often prone to self-sacrificing, people-pleasing. They hold blame in, like you might sense that they have some blame or judgment, but you might not hear it from them because that would bring them into conflict. And they definitely have a belief that it's better to not fight. And again, this is a traditional relationship mindset, like not fighting is better. I heard that from my parents growing up because they didn't really fight. I don't know what was going on underneath the surface, but that was like the big thing, is like, we don't fight. And so then when I got into relationship as a teenager, and I got into a lot of fights with my partners, I just thought I was doing something wrong. But that I don't think is the case. Okay, next we have the fixer. Okay, let me let someone in here. So the fixer, even though there's a positive connotation around making things better, fixing things, really what the fixer is trying to do is they're trying to fix things to avoid discomfort in themselves, even if that's other people's feelings. They might appear or say that, hey, I'm trying to make things better over there, but it's really because they want to avoid the discomfort they're feeling in themselves. I think fixers are often less aware of their sensitivity, maybe more likely to talk negatively, complain, or gossip about others and take the I'm better than position in conflicts. And they also get more resourced when they're with people. They want to talk it out. When they have connection, they're able to relax more. I find fixers often want to prove that they're right, and they're can be very self-focused. I find myself here quite a bit. Like, it's a lot about me when we get into conflict, and I feel like I'm better than. So part of my work is humbling myself through ownership or looking inward and reflecting. They often push blame outward. And this is a really interesting thing that I've noticed working with couples, is that some people, although they say they don't like it, they don't like conflict, they might enjoy the drama of fighting, because it can be really exciting, right? Like that. Why do we watch shows where it's just like all drama? Because it's like engaging and it can be exciting, and it's like it shakes things up in us, just like riding a roller coaster or something. So I'm just always on the lookout for that, even though sometimes couples, like especially two people that are fighting a lot, they say they don't like it, but the payoff can sometimes be that it's fun. Yeah, it's fun when we like get into it, until it's not. It's a funny thing I found. Okay, so now the rock stand tack can also refers to this person as the anchor or the securely attached. This person is aware of their sensitivity, and they're able to manage that and put language to that. They can use their judgmental narratives when they come up to look inward and grow. They understand that what they see outward is a mirror inward. They can handle being with others or being alone. So they know how to balance space and connection. They're able to talk things out or take breaks, kind of the same thing. And two people that are securely attached, even though things might get intense or they might take space, they're able to come together and work things out rather effectively. And they can serve or help others from an authentic place while still having boundaries. They're able to listen until their partner feels understood. They have skills here. I don't think people just are born like securely attached. I think that often we kind of get a little fucked up over time by life and our parents. There's just not there just hasn't been a lot of skill out in the world in the last few decades up until now. There hasn't been a lot of enough information. So I think people have to find their way back to being more securely attached as adults. They can convey their emotions in a way that others can hear. And this is one big thing. When I hear people say, like, yeah, I think I'm really securely attached, but my partner, they're just like, they're way anxious or they're way avoidant. Often want to call BS on that because we tend to meet people at the level at which we are. So someone who's a rock is not going to stay with someone who's not doing their own work, who's an avoider or a fixer for that long. They're going to call this person forward to step up and heal parts of themselves and do relationship work, because that's what a rock needs and wants and understands. So yeah, if you're judging your partner, like looking down on them, like they have all the issues, most likely you're pretty close to each other developmentally. That's what I think. Now I can tell I'm losing my voice a little bit. I normally don't talk this long without taking a break and letting someone else talk. Okay, so let's talk about some of the relationship matchups. Things get really interesting when two people get together and they have, same styles or different styles. So like I said, avoider, roommate syndrome. Don't talk about difficult topics, most likely burying feelings, people pleasing, might even say, hey, we're proud of never fighting. That was, my parents. And this doesn't necessarily come along with it, but often I find there's not as much passion. It's like we're raising the kids or we're doing our life. You don't see as much affection from a couple like this. Can be very cordial with each other, and you can live an entire lifetime and have a good marriage and be in this place. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And I find that it's more of a feminine energy. Again, feminine doesn't mean female. Feminine just means softer. So on the flip side of that, you have fixer. These people tend to fight a lot because they're kind of coming at each other and trying to fix things. Few or no boundaries with themselves or each other. That's why it can be more aggression and name calling, because it's just like over time it just can kind of get worse and worse because there's not the ability to set up boundaries and needs, and it just gets blown out. Family systems can be like this too, just totally chaotic. Do not know how to attune or give space. Often there's a competitive energy, like scorekeeping, like, well, I did this for you, so you got to do this for me. There's obligation. Or you said this to me, you said this mean thing, so now I'm going to get to say a mean thing to you. I'm laughing because I've been in a relationship like this before, and it sucked. It was exciting, but it also sucked in a lot of ways. The finger pointing is going like this, blaming each other. And I noticed too that couples in this place might pendulate to more anxious reconnection, like the couple that is dating and they're breaking up and getting back together all the time, so they fight and like break apart, and then it's like right back, like, let's fix this, let's do it. So there's a lot of this energy. It's more masculine, kind of like harder, firm, maybe mean to each other, maybe kind of caught in fantasy, like I said, like things should be great and everything's perfect right now and you're the love of my life, and then the next moment something happens and you're an asshole or you're a bitch or whatever. Like flowing in and out of fantasy, trying to hang out in this place of just euphoria, like when you come back together. So can kind of use reconnection as like a drug, which it actually does act like a drug chemically in the brain. And then also a right-wrong mindset, like black and white. This is how things are. You're right, I'm wrong, or I'm wrong. Take it all on. It's my fault. Very dramatic. Let's see, how are we doing on time? Cool. Okay, so now we have avoider fixer, or kind of pursuer avoider dynamic. The avoider often feels hurt and the fighter feels guilty for hurting. get into a conflict, and the avoider maybe kind of gets small and shrinks down, and the fighter says some mean things or blames and then feels guilty, and kind of come in and out of this dynamic whenever conflict arises. Polarize under stress. One gets bigger, one gets smaller energetically. It can be a seesaw of blame and shame, like it's all your fault. Oh no, I'm upset that I did that or said that. It's all my fault. A lot of fault taking on or pushing out. And yeah, because there's like a difference here, there's a tendency for either person to judge each other's strategies for dealing with things. So I'm telling you, you need to like man up or face your stuff. And I'm telling you, you need to calm down. It's just two sides of one coin. They're both kind of an anxious tendency. The avoider often feels fearful of the fighter, and the fighter often feels frustrated. That's one thing I hear. Both trying to fix each other though, in some way, change each other. It doesn't feel good. And I find this really interesting when I'm working with couples, is that they may switch roles abruptly, where one person is like attacking the other and the other is shrinking, and all of a sudden the other they get into this place where they're like backed into a corner, and all of a sudden they're like, no, F you, like I'm going to come back and attack you, and then the other person shrinks down. That's kind of like the seesaw effect. Okay. So yes, if you do have someone that's more securely attached, either in general or in a conflict, it can go pretty well. You really just need one person to be resourced in any conflict to open the door for the other person to show up. Jenny and I, this happens often where one of us is just more resourced than the other. That's very normal. We don't often just get there at the same time, depending on what's happening. So the rock often has to kind of take the lead here and be the leader. And they can stay present with whatever's going on for the other. At the same time, the other person might start to feel kind of inferior, like they're the one that needs help, and that can induce some shame. It's okay. The rock can work with that, and hopefully the other person can too, recognize it and voice that. The rock can either step up or give space. They're able to really work with different personalities here pretty well. And the relationship will evolve. If one person is securely attached, in general, the relationship is going to get better. I find that people don't really freak out when, it's not so much where they are in the relationship, is it getting slightly better or slightly worse? So even if it's not that great, but it feels like it's getting a little better, people feel hopeful. But even if it's kind of okay and it feels like it's getting a little bit worse, people start to get anxious, like it will never get better. So I tend to do this working with couples, is like tracking the arc of where the relationship is going and heading. What are the wins? Because sometimes people don't see a lot of those little wins. So I encourage you to look for the wins in your relationship if you're doing this work. Okay, and the rock is definitely going to challenge the other person to step up their game. They're not going to put up with the other person not doing their work for very long, I find. It's usually a temporary place on the way to secure attachment. One person's kind of doing the work and the other's slowly getting on board. You're on the path. And like I mentioned, yeah, a rock is probably not going to stay with someone who's not doing their own work for very long. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to work out. You're going to set boundaries. And if the person doesn't step up, there's going to be some consequence to that, where they say, hey, I don't think I can be in this relationship if things don't change. And that could take weeks if you're dating, or one conversation. It could take years if your life's intertwined and you have kids and stuff. But people that are really know what they want probably aren't going to stay in a relationship that isn't fulfilling that long. It just doesn't line up. Okay, so yes, you made it. This isn't a destination so much, like you're always going to fall into some anxious place here. It's just going to happen. But if you're in a more secure relationship, you got two rocks, it feels secure. You can handle the occasional fight. We've been here before, not our first rodeo. We got it. feel more hopeful. You have commitments. You're not fighting about staying in the relationship as much. You might fight about how to do it, but the relationship itself isn't at stake. You can get intense. Like Jenny and I get into some pretty intense places sometimes because we feel safe enough to express our feelings, and it can look like kind of dramatic. And at the same time, this can be a good sign that you are able to show up and share your emotions, and the other person can handle it. You're differentiated and connected. You have that balance. Each person has their own lives and their own dreams, and they can take care of themselves, and you have a healthy interdependence on each other where you're connected. Not in fantasy. Both partners are committed to learning and growth, and that's obvious by the way that they prioritize their lives, and it feels equal and fair. Yeah, Jenny's actually writing a book on this, so I'm excited to. I haven't read it, but I'll probably be like the first person to read it, and I think it'll be really good. Cool. So now, hopefully you have a pretty good understanding of attachment styles. And now let's talk about just some simple ways to repair some simple benchmarks. So a lot of people come to relationship counseling or coaching after things have already been like pretty hectic for a while, but there's a lot that you can do before conflict so that you don't end up in these emergency situations. So no matter where you are, encourage everyone to do these things, because the more work you do before, the less you're going to have to manage what's happening in the moment or afterwards. This is just huge, just general preparation. I think it's really important for every couple to have agreements about how you do relationship. It's going to be unique to you. I could send you, a list of how Jenny and I do relationship and our needs, but it might not be the same as yours. So you might use that as a template. If you find like couples agreements online, but ideally you need it to be for you. It's going to be unique to you. Every relationship is different. You need systems and tools to work through issues. You need something in your tool belt. I find a lot of couples, they show up and there's just nothing there. There's no map to work with coming back in a connection. So even learning a few simple speaking and listening tools, mindsets are going to go a long way. Being able to take personal responsibility and doing some self-work. And that might look different for different people, but need to be doing some work on yourself, both people. And then life design, prioritizing the relationship. Sometimes couples show up and it's like between work and the kids and chores and life and all the responsibilities that they've taken on, they really have no space to work on the relationship. It's just they roll into bed exhausted, and at that point it's like there's not much energy to talk about things. So this can take some time, but if you really want to prioritize your relationship, you have to organize your life in a way that you can create space for it. And that can take some time if you've deprioritized it over the years. And then a shared reality of like, what are we doing here? Are we both on the same page that like we want to do relationship in this way? We want to feel secure. Are we both here? Is this what we want? And I don't think that's not a single conversation. That's an evolving conversation. Are we on the same page here? Okay. Great. So then things get exciting during conflict. The number one thing that I think I do in couples work, and the number one piece of advice that I would give anyone who's in conflict, is to slow down. Slow down, because it helps relax your nervous system. There's a lot of science behind this too. If you can relax your nervous system, you're able to think more clearly. You're able to access different emotional states that you aren't able to when you're elevated. When you're elevated, you're in fight or flight or freeze. The more that you relax, the more that you'll be able to access compassion, and understanding and gratitude and all these things. But it really begins at the level of the body, and you have to slow the body down, because anxiety is a fast moving, constricting energy. Have to work on slowing that down, so that you can access the parts of your brain you need to. Another thing that helps with that is just staying in attunement with the other person. Eye contact is huge. Locking eyes, practicing not speaking, or waiting to give your response so you can see what's happening with your partner after they finish speaking is huge. It goes a long way. When I first started doing relationship work with Jenny, I realized that when we were in conflict, I couldn't even look at her. Like, it was just like too intense. And the more that we worked on that, I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that very thing that I find so hard to do is also the thing that helps her feel more relaxed. It's the thing that can ultimately help me relax too, if I train myself to do it. And now, like I have practiced, I've worked on it, and I can stay keeping eye contact even when I'm experiencing intense emotions. It's huge. I find that it's often helpful to take turns, especially when both people are elevated. The person that's more resourced will typically be the one that helps relax the other person, and then you can kind of bounce back and forth. I call this VCR. This is a skill that I'm going to be practicing in this training I'm doing next year. It's pretty simple. I mean, there's a lot of different parts to it, but basically it's validation, curiosity, and reflection. It helps relax the other person to know that they know what they did and how it impacted you. And then speaking skills are also huge. Being able to notice when you're blaming, noticing when maybe you're gaslighting, when you're using a tone, all these subtle things are super helpful. Okay. And then after conflict, so being able to manage space, accounting for sensitivity. Usually you have a conflict and you do resolve it most of the way, and then there's some residual charge. So just accounting for that as you're coming back on the way down, that there might be little mini ruptures. And just understanding that it's a process often. Being able to integrate too, like, okay, here's what I learned, here's what we learned, and this is what we're going to do moving forward. We might even have a new agreement come out of this. It's always evolving, always integrating. And then finally, completion. What it feels like to feel complete. Yes, we've resolved this issue. It is possible to get there, 100%. So knowing all that, how do you create a rock solid partnership? How do you put that into practice? Have to go all in something. You have to go all in. I don't think this is something that you can really half-ass. You have to learn new ways. You have to commit yourself. You have to practice. You have to be part of a community. I think that helps with the shared learning. More minds are better than one. You have to have accountability. You have to make this a priority. You have to earn it. There are no shortcuts. And you have to be willing to face your fears, because odds are a big part of what's preventing people from having more secure relationships is this fear. You need help. So if you're watching this and some of this is resonating, you're in some type of relational pain. Maybe you're in a relationship that doesn't feel good. Maybe you're single and you've gone through some relationships that didn't feel all that good. There's definitely a way through this. There is help. There are skills. There's an education that you can get that will really help you progress in your relational development. And this is not stuff that we learned in school. No one learned this in school, as far as I know. And this is what is holding a lot of people back. It's just not having the information, not having the practice, not having a community that really understands, that's psyched on this type of work. I'm psyched on this type of work. So I'm stoked to be leading people through this education through a 6-month program that I'm going to be launching January next year. It's called the Relationship Mastery Program. And this is pulling together everything that I've learned, everything that I use in my relationship that really helps, that I use when I'm helping couples and individuals up level their relationship. We're going to be going through 6 different modules over the course of the 6 months, plus a lot of other things, homework in between the calls, partner practices. I mean, you're going to get some really amazing practice with some badass people. The type of people that do stuff like this are, they're probably people like you that are psyched on relational work. And it's not everybody, it's not for everybody. But if you think that this is something that you really need in your life, I encourage you to jump on a call with me and let's talk about what it's going to look like and how it can help you. So jump on a call with me. All you have to do is book a 20-minute call in the next 48 hours, and we'll talk about this program and how it can fit into your life and what you're needing. If you book a call within the next 48 hours, because this program is kind of a ways out, I'm offering a super duper early bird deal. It's not on my website. It's not anywhere. We can talk about that when we jump on the call.